The merciless son of Haru beat down upon them a relentless force that seemed determined to scour all life from the planet's surface. Daniel stumbled, his legs finally giving out after hours of trudging through the shifting sands. He collapsed to his knees, then fell face first onto the scorching ground. Daniel Rylen cried out, her voice horror from thirst. She rushed to his side, her own movements sluggish and uncoordinated. With trembling hands she rolled him over. Daniel's face was a mask of pain and exhaustion. His lips cracked and bleeding, his eyes, once sharp and alert, were now glazed over with a feverish sheen. Water, as he croaked the word, barely audible. Rylen fumbled with their packs, knowing even as she searched that it was futile. The last of their water had been consumed hours ago. The empty containers, a cruel reminder of their desperate situation. As she cradled Daniel's head in her lap, Rin's mind raced. They were still at least a day's journey from the source of the mysterious signal. They had been tracking the signal that promised salvation, a way to restore life to this dying world. But Daniel wouldn't last another hour in this heat, let alone a day. A terrible choice loomed before her. Stay with Daniel, try to save him, and risk losing their only chance to reach the signal source, or press on alone. Alone, abandoning the man who had been her partner, her protector, her only friend in this harsh world. As if sensing her dilemma, Daniel's hand weakly grasped hers. Go, he whispered, his voice barely a breath. The mission more important. Tears streamed down Ron's face, cutting clean trails through the dust that caked her blue skin. I can't leave you, she choked out. I won't. But even as she said the words, a part of her knew the cruel truth. The fate of Harzo, perhaps of all the surviving colonists, depended on her reaching that signal. How could she weigh one life, even one so precious to her, against the future of an entire world? As Rin grappled with her impossible choice, her mind drifted back to how they had come to this moment 2 weeks earlier. Rylan and Daniel had been scavenging in the ruins of an old colonial outpost when their community crackled to life. Through the static they heard a voice, the first transmission they'd received in years. Help anyone please, we have the key wellspring. The message cut off abruptly, but it was enough to ignite a spark of hope in their hearts. The wellspring was a legend among the survivors, a mythical source of life-giving energy that could transform Haru back into the paradise it once was. They had set out immediately following the faint signal across the treacherous desert. Along the way they encountered wonders and terrors alike, crystalline canyons that sang haunting melodies in the wind, predators mutated by centuries of harsh conditions, hunting in packs with terrifying intelligence, and always the unrelenting desert trying to claim them with every step. Now, with their goal tantalizingly close, it seemed the desert might claim its victory after all. A cool breeze so out of place in the scorching hellscape caressed Ron's cheek. She looked up startled and saw a shimmering in the air before her. As she watched, the shimmer coalesced into a ghostly figure, a woman with blue skin like her own but translucent and glowing with an inner light. Mother, Rylan whispered, disbelieving the apparition smiled sadly. My daughter, the choice before you is but the first of many. The path you walk is treacherous but necessary. I don't understand, Rylan said, her voice trembling. How are you here? How can I choose between Daniel and our mission? You carry within you the power to save both. Her mother's spirit replied. But awakening that power comes at a great cost. Are you willing to pay it? Rylan looked down at Daniel, his breathing growing more labored by the second. Then she gazed out at the vast desert, thinking of all the lives depending on her success. Finally she met her mother's ethereal gaze. Whatever it takes, she said firmly. Tell me what to do. The ghost of her mother nodded solemnly. Place your hands upon the sand, feel the pulse of Haru beneath you. Your people were its guardians once. It is time for you to take up that mantle. With a deep breath, Rylan gently lowered Daniel's head to the ground. She placed her palms flat on the scorching sand, ignoring the pain as it seared her skin. Closing her eyes, she reached out with her senses just as her mother's spirit instructed. At first there was nothing but the hollow whisper of the wind, but then faintly at first, but growing stronger. She felt it, a rhythm like a great heartbeat pulsing deep beneath the earth. The wellspring, she gasped, her eyes flying open. I can feel it draw upon it. Her mother urged, but be warned, the power may overwhelm you. To channel it is to risk losing yourself. Rylan nodded, gritting her teeth as she focused on the energy thrumming beneath her hands. She thought of Daniel, of his unwavering Loyalty and courage. She thought of the countless others struggling to survive on this dying world with a cry that was part pain, part exultation. She pulled puff surged through her ancient and primal. Her skin began to glow brighter and brighter until she was incandescent. The sand around her hands turned to glass, spreading outward in a crystalline circle as the rain poured down, transforming the parched landscape. Rain felt a change within herself as profound as the one occurring in the world around her. Each drop that touched her skin seemed to wash away layers of fear, doubt, and guilt that had accumulated over years of harsh survival. Daniel stirred, his eyes flickering open as he took in the miraculous sight of water falling from the sky. His expression shifted from confusion to wonder. Ray, he whispered, his voice gaining strength. What's happening? Rylon helped him sit up, supporting his weight as he regained his bearings. It's raining, Daniel, she said, a smile breaking across her face like the sun through storm clouds. We're going to be okay. As Daniel tilted his head back, letting the cool water run over his face, Rylon noticed something extraordinary. Where the raindrops touched his sun-damaged skin, the angry red burns began to fade. It was as if the rain wasn't just hydrating him but healing him on a deeper level. Look, she breathed, pointing to a spot near their feet amidst the muddy sand. A tiny green shoot had already pushed its way to the surface, unfurling delicate leaves to catch the life-giving moisture. Daniel's eyes widened in amazement. How is this possible? Rylon shook her head, still trying to process the enormity of what had occurred. I'm not entirely sure, but I think I tapped into something. The wellspring maybe, or some part of it. As she spoke, her gaze was drawn to a glimmer in the wet sand. Kneeling down, she brushed away the grit to reveal a small luminous crystal. As her fingers touched its smooth surface, a jolt of energy passed through her, and suddenly her mind was flooded with images and voices. Daughter of Lorien, a chorus of voices echoed in her head. You have taken the first step on a long and perilous journey. Rylon gasped, nearly dropping the crystal in surprise. Did you hear that? She asked Daniel, who was watching her with concern. He shook his head. Here, what? Are you all right? She nodded absently, her focus on the crystal and the voices within it. It's my ancestors. The Lorien, they're speaking to me through the crystal. The wellspring flows through all things. The VO is continued. It is life, it is memory, it is the very soul of Haru, but it has been wounded, and in its pain it lashes out. Images flash through Ron's mind. The lush world Haru once was, the cataclysm that nearly destroyed it, and the aftermath. She saw the first mutations, creatures and people warped by the uncontrolled energies of the damaged wellspring. With a start, she realized the truth about the predators and other mutants that roamed the wastelands. They weren't just victims of harsh conditions or random mutation, they were the physical manifestation of Haru's pain, the planet's tormented attempt to adapt to its new broken reality. Oh no, Rylon murmured, her heart heavy with the weight of this revelation. What is it? Daniel asked, his hand on her shoulder. Rylon looked up at him, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. The mutants, the predators, they're not our enemies, Daniel. They're victims just like us. When the wellspring was damaged, it twisted them, changed them. Daniel's brow furrowed as he processed this information. But they've killed people. They're dangerous, I know, she said softly, but now we understand why, and maybe if we can heal the wellspring we can heal them too. As if in response to her words, a distant howl echoed across the dunes, but this time instead of fear, Rain felt a deep sense of sorrow and responsibility. These creatures, no matter how monstrous they appeared, were as much a part of Haru as she was. To save the planet, they would need to find a way to save everyone, human, Lauren, and mutant alike. The rain began to taper off, but its effects remained. The air felt cleaner, charged with possibility. Small puddles dotted the landscape, reflecting the sky like tiny mirrors, and everywhere Rylon looked she saw signs of life, stirring seeds, germinating insects emerging from the sand, even small lizards darting between newly formed patches of vegetation. We need to keep moving, Rylon said, getting to her feet and offering a hand to Daniel. The signal we were tracking, I think I understand now. It's not just a distress call, it's the wellspring itself crying out for help. Daniel nodded, his expression a mixture of determination and newfound hope as they gathered there. Gear now considerably lightened without the burden of water containers. He paused to look at Rylon. You've changed, he said. softly reaching out to touch her shimmering skin not just on the outside. "There's something more to you now," Rylan smiled, feeling the power of the wellspring humming just beneath her skin. "We've both changed, Daniel. This rain, this moment, it's washed away more than just the dust and grime. I feel like I'm finally becoming who I was always meant to be." As they set off towards the source of the signal, the desert around them continued to transform with each step. Rylan took small flowers bloomed in her footprints, their delicate petals a riot of colors against the sand. The very air seemed to sing with renewed vitality. But even as hope blossomed in their hearts, Rylan knew that greater challenges lay ahead. The forces that had brought Haru to the brink of destruction would not simply fade away. The wellspring needed to be fully awakened and healed, a task that would require all of her newfound power and perhaps more. And there was the question of the mutants. How could they be saved? Would they even want to be returned to their former selves after so long in their altered state? These questions and more weighed on Ron's mind as they journeyed onward, but for the first time in years she felt truly alive, truly purposeful, with the wisdom of her ancestors flowing through the crystals, the support of Daniel by her side, and the power of the wellspring growing within her. Rylan was ready to face whatever trials awaited them. The rebirth of Haru had begun, but the true test was yet to come. But something had gone terribly wrong. In the span of a single generation, the planet had transformed into a hellscape. The rivers dried up, the forest withered and died, and the very air became poison. Now all that remained were scattered bands of survivors fighting tooth and nail. Every precious drop of water. Ron's reverie was shattered by a sudden crackle of static from Daniel's communications unit. Both of them froze, hardly daring to breathe, as a faint voice emerged from the white noise. "Help anyone, please." Daniel's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's impossible. There shouldn't be anyone out this far." Rylan felt a surge of hope tempered by caution. It could be a trap. "The Marauders have used similar tactics before." "True," Daniel conceded, "but we can't ignore it. If there's even a chance someone needs our help." Rylan nodded, understanding the unspoken sentiment. In a world as harsh as Harzo, compassion was sometimes the only thing that separated the survivors from the savages. "Can you pinpoint the signal?" she asked. Daniel fiddled with his equipment for a moment before pointing toward a distant ridge. "It's coming from somewhere beyond those dunes, at least a day's journey, maybe more." Rylan took a deep breath, tasting the acrid air even through her protective gear. "Then we better get moving. We'll need to ration our water even more strictly." As they altered their course, heading towards the mysterious signal, neither of them spoke of the gravity of their decision. They both knew that this detour might very well be a death sentence, but in a world where every day was a struggle for survival, the chance to save another life, to make a difference, was worth any risk. The unforgiving sun beat down upon them as they pressed onward, each step a battle against the shifting sands. Rylan found herself grateful for her unique physiology. Her crystalline skin offered some protection against the deadly radiation that bombarded the planet's surface, but even that gift had its limits. And she could feel the familiar ache building in her bones as the day wore on. As night fell, the temperature plummeted with terrifying speed. Daniel and Rylan huddled together in a hastily constructed shelter, their bodies pressed close for warmth. The wind howled outside, carrying with it the eerie cries of distant predators. "Tell me about your people again," Daniel whispered, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The Lorian. Rylan closed her eyes, allowing herself to be transported back to a time before the devastation. "We were guardians," she said softly, "keepers of ancient knowledge and protectors of the natural world. Our skin." She held up her hand, watching as the faint starlight refracted through her crystalline flesh. "Was a gift from the planet itself, or so our legends claimed." Daniel listened intently, as he always did when Rylan spoke of her lost culture. In these moments she wasn't just his partner in survival, she was a living link to a world that now existed only in memory. "What do you think happened to him?" he asked gently. Ron's expression darkened. "I don't know. When the catastrophe struck, everything happened so fast. Communications broke down, cities fell. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. I searched for others, but." She trailed off, the pain of those memories still fresh even after all these years. Daniel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore, Whatever happens, we face it together." She managed a small smile, grateful for his Unwavering support as sleep finally claimed them. Ron's dreams were filled with visions of blue-skinned figures dancing beneath trees that had long since turned to dust. The dawn brought with it a new challenge. As they emerged from their shelter, they found themselves face to face with a massive sandstorm. Looming on the horizon, its towering wall of swirling dust and debris stretched as far as the eye could see, a force of nature that could strip flesh from bone in a matter of minutes. We can't outrun it, Daniel said grimly, checking his instruments. And there's no shelter for miles. Ron's mind raced, searching for a solution. Then an idea struck her. The crystal cave, she said urgently. Remember the stories the traders told? If we can find an entrance, we might be able to wait out the storm underground. It was a desperate gamble, but they had no other choice. Voice as the storm drew ever closer, they scrambled across the dunes, searching frantically for any sign of the fabled caves. The wind grew stronger with each passing moment, stinging their exposed skin and threatening to knock them off their feet. Just as hope began to fade, Daniel spotted it, a dark opening, half hidden by a rocky outcropping. They dove inside mere seconds before the full fury of the storm hit, the howling wind drowning out all other sound. As their eyes adjusted to the darkness, they found themselves in a breathtaking cavern. Massive crystal formations jutted from the walls and ceiling, their facets catching what little light filtered through the cave entrance and transforming it into a dazzling array of colors. It's beautiful, Rylin whispered, her voice filled with awe. For a moment she could almost imagine that she was back among her own people, surrounded by the natural wonders they had sworn to protect. Daniel nodded in agreement, but his expression remained guarded. Let's hope it's not just pretty but safe. We don't know what might be living down here. As if in answer to his concerns, a low growl echoed through the cavern. Both of them tensed, weapons at the ready, as a pair of glowing eyes emerged from the shadows. The creature that stepped into view was like nothing they had ever seen before, a twisted amalgamation of reptile and insect, its cow's hide covered in by luminescent patterns. Predator, Daniel hissed, recognizing the telltale signs of mutation. The beast lunged forward with terrifying speed, its Mandy snapping hungrily. Rylan dodged to the side, her crystalline skin flaring with an inner light that momentarily blinded their attacker. Daniel seized the opportunity, firing a concentrated burst from his energy rifle. The predator howled in pain and rage, thrashing wildly as it tried to shake off the effects of the weapon. Rylan and Daniel retreated deeper into the cave system, knowing that where there was one mutant there were likely to be more. As they navigated the twisting tunnels, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter, but with each step they were moving further from their original course and from the mysterious signal that had drawn them into this perilous journey. We need to find another way out, Rylan said, her voice tight with tension. If we stay down here too long, we'll never reach the source of that distress call. Daniel nodded grimly, agreed, but we can't just wander blindly. These caves could go on for miles. As they debated their next move, a faint glimmer caught Ron's eye. She approached one of the crystal formations, running her hand along its smooth surface. To her astonishment, she felt a subtle vibration, almost like a pulse. Daniel, she called out excitedly, I think these crystals are salive. He joined her, his skepticism evident. That's impossible. Nothing could survive down here for centuries. But as he placed his own hand on the crystal, his eyes widened in surprise. I'll be damned, he muttered. You're right, but what does it mean? Rylan closed her eyes, focusing on the faint energy she could sense flowing through the crystal network. It reminded her of stories passed down through generations of her people, tales of a time when the Lauran could communicate with the very essence of a planet. Taking a deep breath, she pressed her forehead against the cool surface of the crystal. In her mind she formed a clear image of the cave system, willing the strange life form to show her the way out. For a long moment nothing happened, then with a suddenness that made her gasp, Ron's mind was filled with a flood of information, twisting passages, hidden chambers, and finally a route to the surface. She opened her eyes, a mix of excitement and trepidation on her face. I know the way, she said softly, but Daniel, I don't think we found these caves by accident. Something led us here. He raised an eyebrow, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. What do you mean? Rylan struggled to put into words the strange sensation she had experienced. It's like the planet itself is Trying to communicate these crystals, they're not just alive, they're part of a vast network, and I think they're connected to whatever is sending that distress signal. Daniel absorbed this information in silence, his tactical mind already considering the implications. If you're right, he said slowly, then we might be walking into something far bigger than a simple rescue mission. Rylon nodded, her resolve strengthening, all the more reason to press on. Whatever's happening here, it could be the key to understanding what went wrong on Haru, maybe even finding a way to reverse it. With renewed purpose they set off through the labyrinthine passages, guided by Rin's newfound connection to the crystal network. As they traveled, they encountered more signs of the planet's hidden life, bioluminescent fungi that pulsed in rhythm with their footsteps, strange rock formations that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. Hours passed, and just when it seemed they might be lost forever in this underground realm, they emerged into a vast cavern. At its center stood a structure that defied belief, a towering spire of interlocking crystals, each one pulsing with an inner light. By all that's holy, Daniel breathed, his usual stoicism shattered by the sight before them. What is this place? Before Rylon could respond, a voice echoed through the chamber, the same voice they had heard in the distress call, but now clear and strong. Welcome, travelers, it said. We've been waiting a very long time for someone like you to find us. From behind the crystal spire emerged a figure that made both Rylon and Daniel freeze and shock. It was a man, but unlike any they had ever seen. His skin shimmered with the same crystalline properties as Rylon, but to a far greater degree. It was as if his entire body was composed of living gemstone. My name is Thorn, the strange being said, a gentle smile on his face, and I believe we have much to discuss about the future of Harzo and the role you both have to play in it. Rylon and Daniel exchanged a stunned glance, the realization dawning that their journey had only just begun. The mysteries of Haru stretched out before them, promising revelations that would shake the very foundations of their understanding of this alien world. As Thorn beckoned them forward, Rayan felt a surge of emotions, fear, excitement, and above all a glimmer of hope that had long been absent from her life. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew that she and Daniel would face them together, united in their quest to uncover the truth and perhaps, just perhaps, find a way to bring life back to this dying world. The crystal spire pulsed with an otherworldly light as Thorn led Rylon and Daniel deeper into the hidden complex. Each step revealed new wonders. Holographic displays flickering to life, showing glimpses of Haru as it once was. A vibrant world teeming with life and possibility. I know you have questions, Thorn said, his voice resonating with an authority that belied his appearance, but first we must ensure your safety. The journey here has no doubt taken its toll. As if on cue, a section of the wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing a small chamber filled with advanced medical equipment. Daniel hesitated, his soldier's instincts wearing with their desperate need for aid. Rylon placed a reassuring hand on his arm. It's all right, she said softly, I can sense it. This place, these crystals, they're connected to my people somehow, we can trust them. Reluctantly Daniel allowed himself to be led to one of the diagnostic beds. As he laid down, a holographic display sprang to life above him, showing a detailed scan of his body. Rylon gasped as she saw the extent of the damage, microfractures in his bones, cellular degradation from prolonged radiation exposure, dangerously low hydration levels. Your friend is in critical condition, Thorn said gravely. The desert has taken a heavy toll, but we can help with a gesture. Thorn activated a series of crystalline tubes that descended from the ceiling. A glowing blue liquid began to flow through them, gradually enveloping Daniel's body. What is that? Rylon asked, a mix of fascination and concern in her voice. A non-air regenerative solution, Thorn explained. It will repair the damage at a cellular level and bolster his natural defenses against Haru's harsh environment. As they watched, the angry red patches on Daniel's skin began to fade, replaced by a healthy glow. His breathing, which had been labored and shallow, deepened and steadied. Rylon turned to Thorn, her eyes shining with gratitude. Thank you, she said softly, but who are you? How is all of this possible? Thorn's expression grew somber. I am the last of the Guardians, he said. We were tasked with protecting Haru's most precious resource, the wellspring. He waved his hand, and the air around them shimmered. Suddenly they were Surrounded by a three-dimensional projection of the planet, Ra watched in awe as layers peeled away, revealing a vast network of crystalline structures beneath the surface. The wellspring is not just water, Thorn continued, it is life itself, a self-sustaining ecosystem that once nourished the entire planet. Your people, the Loran, were its caretakers. Ron's mind reeled at this revelation. But what happened? Why did everything die? Thorn's eyes clouded with ancient sorrow. Greed, he said simply. When the human colonists arrived, they saw Haru as a resource to be exploited. They began to tap into the wellspring, directly disrupting the delicate balance that had been maintained for millennia. The holographic display shifted, showing scenes of massive drilling operations. Pipelines snaking across the landscape. Rylon watched in horror as the once lush world withered and died before her eyes. We tried to stop them, Thorn said, his voice heavy with regret, but by the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. The wellspring began to fail, and with it the entire ecosystem of Haru. Ron's mind raced, trying to process the enormity of what she was hearing. But you survived, she said, looking at Thorn with a mixture of awe and confusion. How Thorn's crystalline form shimmered as he moved, leading them to another chamber. This one was dominated by a massive computer core, its surface etched with intricate patterns that pulsed with energy. I uploaded my consciousness into the crystal matrix, he explained. It was the only way to maintain the last remnants of the wellspring and wait for someone who could help restore it. Daniel, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Why us? What makes you think we can do anything about this? Thorn turned to Rylon, his gaze intense. Because of her, the Lauran were not just caretakers, they were conduits. Their unique biology allowed them to interface directly with the wellspring to channel its energy and direct its flow. Rylon felt a sudden weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. But I'm the last, she said softly. I don't know how to do any of that. The knowledge is within you, Thorn, or passed down through generations. Encoded in your very DNA. With training you can awaken those dormant abilities. Daniel stepped forward, his protective instincts kicking in. And what exactly would that tail? What are you asking her to do? Thorn's expression grew grave. To save Harzo, we must reactivate the wellspring, but doing so will trigger the planet's automated defense systems, relics from the old world designed to protect the wellspring from further exploitation. He waved his hand, and the holographic display changed once more. It showed a massive underground chamber filled with ancient machinery and surrounded by a crackling energy field. This is the heart of the wellspring, Thorn explained. To reach it we must disable the defense grid, but in doing so we risk awakening other dangers that have lain dormant for centuries. Rylon and Daniel exchanged a look, the gravity of the situation settling over them. This was far more than they had bargained for when they set out to investigate a simple distress call. What about the marauders? Daniel asked, and the other survivors on the surface? If we start messing with these ancient systems, won't that put them at risk? Thorn nodded solemnly. It's a valid concern. The reactivation process will be violent tectonic shifts. Massive energy discharges. Those on the surface will be in grave danger. Ron's heart sank. They had come here hoping to find a way to save their fellow survivors, not to potentially doom them. There has to be another way, she insisted. Thorn's expression softened. Perhaps there is. The crystal network extends across the entire planet. If we can send out a warning, give people time to seek shelter, or better yet, Daniel interjected, bring them here. This facility seems well protected. Couldn't it serve as a sanctuary? Thorn considered this for a moment. It's possible, but risky. The more people who know about this place, the greater the chance that someone might try to exploit the wellspring again. Rylon stood tall, her resolve strengthening. We have to try. These people have suffered enough. If there's a chance to save them and the planet, we have to take it. Daniel nodded in agreement. So what's our next move? Thorn gestured towards a bank of control panels. We need to boost the signal from the crystal network. If we can amplify it enough, we might be able to reach every settlement on the planet simultaneously. As they set to work, Rylon couldn't help but feel a sense of destiny. All her life she had felt like an outsider, the last of her kind, adrift in a dying world. Now she understood that she was part of something much, much larger, a legacy that stretched back millennia. Hours passed as they worked tirelessly to modify the ancient systems. Rylon found herself instinctively understanding the complex technology, her fingers dancing across control surfaces. As if guided by an unseen force, finally Thorn announced, "We're ready, Rylon. It's time. Focus your mind on the crystal network just as you did in the caves. Visualize your message spreading across the planet." Rylan closed her eyes, placing her hands on the pulsing crystal core. She thought of all the people struggling to survive on the surface, the fear, the hardship, the fading hope in her mind. She crafted a message of warning and of promise. "People of Haru, hear me. A great change is coming, one that may save our world or destroy it utterly. Seek shelter in the crystal caves, follow the residents' safety, and hope await you." As she spoke the words in her mind, she felt a surge of energy coursed through her body. The crystal core blazed with light. And for a moment Rylon could sense the entire planet, every grain of sand, every withered plant, every desperate survivor. When she opened her eyes, she saw Daniel and Thorn staring at her in amazement. "It worked," Thorn said softly. "The message is spreading already. People are beginning to respond." Daniel's tactical mind was already racing ahead. "We need to prepare for their arrival. Food, water, medical supplies, and defenses. The Marauders won't take kindly to losing their control over the water supply." Thorn nodded grimly. "Indeed, and we must move quickly. The longer we wait, the greater the risk that someone will try to seize control of the wellspring for themselves." As if in response to his words, a warning klaxon began to blare throughout the facility. Thorn's expression turned to one of alarm as he studied a nearby display. "What is it?" Rylon asked, dread building in her stomach. "Multiple breaches in the upper levels," Thorn replied. "It seems our message has attracted some unwanted attention. The Marauders have found us." Daniel's hand went to his weapon. "How many?" "Too many," Thorn said grimly, "and they're not alone. There are mutants with them, predators unlike any I've seen before." Ron's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan. They couldn't abandon the facility, not when it represented their only hope of saving Haru, but neither could they allow the Marauders to seize control of the wellspring. "The defense systems," she said suddenly. "You said they were designed to protect the wellspring. Can we use them against the intruders?" Thorn's eyes widened in realization. Yes, we could, but it would require precise control. One misstep and we could trigger a cascade failure that would destroy everything." Daniel placed a hand on Rain's shoulder. "You can do this," he said with unwavering confidence. "I've seen what you're capable of. If anyone can control those systems, it's you." Rylan took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "All right," she said, "tell me what I need to do." As Thorn began to explain the intricacies of the ancient defense grid, the sounds of battle echoed from the upper levels. Time was running out. The fate of Haru, and perhaps the entire human race now, rested on Rin's shoulders. With trembling hands she reached out to interface with the defense systems, praying that the inherited knowledge of her people would be enough to guide her through the challenges ahead. The crystal core hummed with energy as Ron's consciousness merged with the ancient systems. In her mind's eye she could see the entire facility laid out like a three-dimensional blueprint. Red dots swarmed through the upper levels, the Marauders and their mutant allies tearing through everything in their path. "Focus." Rylan Thorn's voice came as if from a great distance. "The defense grid is tied directly to the wellspring. You must be precise in your commands or you risk destabilizing the entire system." Rylan gritted her teeth, sweat beading on her forehead as she struggled to direct the flow of energy. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to activate the facility's defenses. Force fields sprang to life, cutting off entire sections. Automated turrets emerged from hidden compartments, their targeting systems locking onto the invaders. But the Marauders were relentless. For every group that was cut off or eliminated, two more seemed to take their place, and the predators. Rylon shuddered as she watched them through the facility sensors. These were no mere mutants. They moved with terrifying speed and coordination, as if guided by some malevolent intelligence. "It's not enough," she gasped, her voice strained with effort. "There are too many of them." Daniel, who had been monitoring the situation on a nearby console, spoke up. "What about the environmental controls? Can you use them?" Thorn's eyes widened. "Of course, the facility was designed to withstand Haru's harshest conditions. If we can replicate those conditions inside." Rylon understood immediately. With a thought, she redirected power to the environmental systems. Temperatures in the upper levels plummeted while the air was filled with stinging abrasive particles, a miniature sandstorm raging through the corridors. The effect was Immediate the rares caught off guard by the sudden assault began to fall back, even the predators seemed disoriented. Their movements becoming erratic and uncoordinated, but the victory was short-lived as Rylan watched in horror. One of the predators managed to breach a critical junction. Alarms blared as the creature's claws tore into a power conduit, sending a surge of energy through the entire system. Rylan screamed as feedback lashed through her mind. She felt herself being torn away from the defense grid, her connection to the wellspring wavering. Rylan Daniels' voice cut through the chaos. She felt his arms around her, supporting her as she swayed on her feet. The wellspring, she gasped, it's destabilizing. If we don't do something, it's going to collapse entirely. Thorn's face was grim. There's only one way to stabilize it now. We have to fully activate the wellspring. Open all the floodgates at once. Daniel's eyes widened in alarm. But you said that could be catastrophic. The surface will be transformed. Thorn finished. But it's our only chance. If the wellspring collapses, Harzo is doomed. Regardless, Rylan knew what she had to do. With the last of her strength, she reached out to the crystal core once more. This time, instead of trying to control the flow of energy, she surrendered herself to it entirely. Power surged through her, more intense than anything she had ever experienced. She felt as if she was being unmade, her very atoms torn apart and reassembled. Through it all, she clung to a single thought, the image of Haru as it once was, a world of life and beauty in the command center. Daniel and Thorn watched in awe as Ron's body began to glow with an inner light. The crystal core pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, faster and faster, until it became a continuous blur of energy. Then, with a sound like the birth of a star, the wellspring awakened. Miles beneath the surface, ancient pumps roared to life. Water that had lain dormant for centuries began to flow once more, surging upwards with unstoppable force. The ground shook as tectonic plates shifted, releasing long-buried aquifers on the surface. The first drops fell like a miracle upon the parched earth, then more and more until the sky was filled with torrential rain. The poisonous dust that had choked the air for so long was washed away, revealing a sky of startling blue. In the crystal caves and makeshift shelters across the planet, the survivors of Haru watch in disbelief as water flowed freely for the first time in living memory. Rivers carved new paths through the sand, while dormant seeds awakened by the sudden moisture began to sprout back in the hidden facility. Rylan collapsed into Daniel's arms, her body racked with exhaustion, but even as consciousness faded, she smiled, for in that moment of connection with the wellspring she had seen a vision of Haru's future, a world reborn, teeming with life and possibility. As Dan cradled her, he looked at Thor in concern. Will she be all right? The crystalline being nodded, a look of wonder on his face. She will be more than all right. She has done what I thought impossible. She has given Harzo a second chance. Outside, the storm raged on, but it was no longer a harbinger of death. Instead, it was the first cleansing rain of a new era. The desert that had swallowed all life was now giving birth to a world of green. Epilogue. Months passed in, and Haru transformed. The relentless desert receded, replaced by sprawling grasslands and burgeoning forests. The survivors, guided by Rylan and Daniel, emerged from their shelters to build a new society, one that worked in harmony with the planet rather than exploiting it. The hidden facility became a center of learning and governance, with Thorn serving as an advisor and repository of ancient knowledge. Under his guidance, the people of Harzo began to unlock the secrets of the crystal technology, using it to heal the left by centuries of devastation. Rylan, forever changed by her communion with the wellspring, devoted herself to nurturing the planet's rebirth. Her blue skin now shimmered with an inner light, a visible sign of her connection to Haru's living heart. Daniel too was transformed. The nanites that had saved his life had altered his physiology, granting him increased strength and resilience. His skin now bore intricate patterns that shifted like clouds before a storm, a reminder of the rain that had brought salvation to AD world. Together they walked hand in hand through a meadow that had once been barren sand. In the distance, the spires of a new city rose, its architecture a blend of human ingenuity and crystalline beauty. Do you ever wonder? Daniel asked, his voice soft with wonder, what would have happened if we hadn't answered that distress call? Rylan smiled, her eyes reflecting the